Hi, I'm Ben. Welcome to my book corner. This is the last of my overdue videos to talk about. This one is talking about my reread of the Wheel of Time series. So this was a buddy read initially. The idea was it was going to go over the course of last year and this year. And the buddy read side kind of fell apart because life happens and that's just how it is. So I have managed to read books 1 through 4 by Read. I have audiobooks these. Rosamund Pike has done the narration for books 1 through 4 now. I do not believe they're continuing with the series due to the cancelling of the Prime TV series, which is a shame because they were spectacular. But I have thoughts. I have thoughts on these books. Again, it's been a long time since I've read the whole series. My intention was to be about halfway, so around books 7-ish by the end of last year. Didn't get anywhere near that. That's perfectly fine. I'm going to carry on with it throughout 2026. Let's dive into my thoughts book by book. I'm going to touch on characters after I've spoken about all the books because there's some themes going on which I want to look at more there. But starting with book 1, Eye of the World. This is perhaps the most formulaic and most Lord of the Rings-esque of all the Wheel of Time books. And that is both a good and a bad thing. So, I have sometimes referred to Wheel of Time disingenuously as Lord of the Rings Extended. That is not a fair critique of the series, but it would be a fair critique in some regards to book 1, because there's a lot of symmetry between Eye of the World and Lord of the Rings. You have a small, secluded, overall pretty friendly and self-enclosed rural area where they're pretty much cut off from the outside world. They only really get news from when traders pass through, or the occasional visitor that actually just knows the places there. This is very much a forgotten area. Aemond's Field is so much like the Shire, just with humans. The next thing, you have your magical mentor figure. In this case, it is Moraine. You have a chosen one, which is round, although it is a bit more ambiguous in this one. It's a little bit not as clear who the chosen one is, and that's something that runs through the first book in particular. You have people hunting for this chosen one. You have our group escaping, being led away by the magical figure, being pursued, crossing a river to get away from them that they could not cross. These are dark, shrouded, hooded figures on horseback, so not too dissimilar to the Nazgul. You have the country bumpkins' first time in a big town, and how overall they feel about how dirty it is, how busy it is, how many people are there, and very much this out of depth feeling. Again, you have something similar in Lord of the Rings. You have your ranger-like figure. You have Lan, who kind of plays the Aragorn figure of the mighty warrior, the tracker, somebody who has a lineage which is investigated further into the story, just like Aragorn does as well. You have a magical MacGuffin at one point that kind of transforms the person that owns it into some sort of weazened mad goblin-like creature. Sounds a bit like the Ring. It does give a load of abilities with it as well, though. You have people betraying them. You have going through royal areas as well where they shouldn't be able to get to. You have the party being split at times as well, so they can go on their own individual adventures. And finally, you have the aim to reach the other side of the map into this blasted, black, sterile, burnt land full of monsters and things that want to kill them to stop the big bad happening. Very Lord of the Rings. So with all that being said, I did still enjoy Eye of the World. One thing that is worth mentioning is the ending of this, and this is something with book 2 as well, and to a lesser extent book 3. The ending for this doesn't fit with the rest of the series for a number of different reasons, which I'm not going to go into too much here, but This book could 100% work as a one and done. It has a clear ending. The ending is ambiguous enough that it could feel like the end of the story in general. But obviously that wasn't to be the case. A couple of other things in here, though. You do see little bits of foreshadowing in here, or what will end up being foreshadowing later on, suggesting that Jordan did have a much longer tail idea for this story than it just being a one and done. And there's the odd side characters that seem incredibly insignificant in here that do play into tales later on in the story. I also like the foreshadowing that you see throughout this with some of the tales, with some stuff that happens later on. Is this pretty formulaic fantasy? Yes. Is it incredibly high detailed formulaic fantasy? Also, yes. If you like your world building, there is quite a bit here. Not to the same extent as the later books, though. So overall, I enjoyed this a fair bit. Now, I do have the split version of this, so mine is split into two books. You can see it just behind me there, as it was split into two to sit in YA sections at one point. But overall, it wasn't a bad reread. And actually, I've reread book one multiple times at this point, so no real massive surprises there. Book two, The Great Hunt, is a weird one. I personally really like it, but it is fair to say that in terms of pacing, this is very, very, very strange. This starts with a bang right off the bat, and I really, really do like that. And it ends with a bang as well, literally speaking, as we have moments of prophecy being fulfilled. The middle of this is a walking simulator, and it very much zeroes in on Rand in particular and Perrin as well, as they travel to find out and catch up with some dark fiends that have stolen the Horn of Valir, one of the prophesized magical items that's needed for the last battle. I love the way this starts because straight away at the beginning, you have this claustrophobic environment. I love the character work for Rand in particular in this one. And this is where Rand gets elevated for me, because on previous reads of the series, Rand's kind of been my least favourite of the three boys. Generally speaking, felt quite formulaic in terms of the chosen one sort of template. And I don't think I clicked on some of the things that were going on, and really paying attention to this one drove home a number of the things that Rand is starting to go through here, partially caused by his ability to use Saidar, which is the male half of the magical essence of the world, and the taint on that that's beginning to have an effect on him, and you're beginning to see the first startings of that in here at points. But you have a lot of time with Rand very much inside his own head in this one. You get out of the Citadel near the beginning of the story, you end up on a chase, and Rand is very, very enclosed. And the whole thing with this is Rand feels trapped. Initially, he feels trapped because can't get away from the sort of the Borderlands. Finally decides to get away from the Borderlands. Can't. All the doors have been locked. The Aes Sedai are there. The head of the Aes Sedai, the Amelin seat, is also there and wants to have a chat. Not good for someone who is male and can channel. But Rand is sent off, is told that you can go and do whatever you want. Doesn't trust this at all. Completely, totally, utterly, 100% accurate belief to have on a side point. And goes off to try and get the Horn of Valir back. And the middle sort of 50% of this book is just walking and talking, and it's not for everybody. I personally loved it because it filled in so many blanks, and this sort of a gradual decline that Rand goes through does accelerate as the series goes on. And the first moments of that I found here. And there's also some really interesting little lore bits that we find here. We find out that there is 100% dark fiends and traitors within the inner circle. We kind of already knew that. It is confirmed here, but we don't know who. And the reveal at the end might be really surprising to some people if you don't pick up on the breadcrumbs as you go through. There's also setting up for another one that is not revealed until way later in the series, like considerably later. We also get a bit more information about the Dark One's power here as well, and how the oaths to the Dark One are binding in the same way that the Oath Rod and the three oaths are binding to Aes Sedai. And I really, really like that. I like the fact that one overpowers the other as well. The fact that the Dark One's actual oaths overpower the magical artifacts used to sort of bind the Aes Sedai is a really interesting tidbit. And just like those oaths, there are loopholes in the Dark Ones, but they are so much smaller. And as you see that first kind of reveal towards the end, it explains some stuff that happens later on. Really like that. I like as we begin to extend through some of the politics of the White Tower. It's really interesting seeing the journey that the girls go on in this. Elaine comes in, the daughter heir of Andor, far more of a figure in this one than in the previous book. And then you have Nynaeve, and you have my brain's just gone. Egwene. Egwene as well at the White Tower. And the first thing, how powerful are these girls? Nynaeve in particular, magnitudes of power above most Aes Sedai, and immediately gets raised even more. You see the hardship that they have to go through, the fact they're seen as wilder, so are kind of looked down on, and there is politics at play, and there's other stuff at play as well. And then we have the introduction of the Sanshan from over the sea, Arthur Hawkwing's children in many regards, and their intention to come and impose law on the land, really unite the land under a common banner, ready for the last battle, reclaim the land that they believe is theirs. Very much an antagonistic force. It is worth noting, if you follow the rules, you're treated really, really well here. But they leash their magic users. Their magic users are leashed, and they are controlled. And slaves. And this is perhaps, for me, Egwene's most powerful book because of what she goes through after being captured. You have some revelations here about certain factions within the White Tower. That's something that, again, we suspect it's not necessarily 100% shown in book one, but it's certainly hinted to. We get the confirmation here, especially for some of those people. And again, you have big battle scene, and this is where you truly see plot armor in the series. But plot armor normally annoys me. It annoys me when plot happens because plot needs to happen, so characters make stupid decisions. And it annoys me when characters get out of situations they have no right getting through. Both of those things are baked into the world building of this one, as the world is a tapestry that is woven by the Wheel of Time. And certain individuals, specifically the Ta'Veren, so Rand, Mat, Perrin being the most powerful for a long time, warp the pattern around them. So things that should not happen kind of do, and it gives them an inherent plot armor, especially in Mat's case, although we don't see it too much in here. That means they get through these situations that they shouldn't. The ending is fine. Again, a bit blockbuster, not quite like it is in book one. This thematically fits a lot more, especially due to some bits of the prophecy of the dragon that we know about. This is where Rand officially becomes the Dragon Reborn at the end of this one. And the repercussions really do ripple through the story. But you also see the fracturing of the friend group here as well. Between the boys, at least. There's always been a little bit of an issue between the boys and the girls. With the boys being stubborn and not listening and feel like they're being punished all the time, whereas the girls just thinking the boys are being woolheads, which is fine. I actually really like this. I like this a lot more than book one, but the middle bit is not going to be for everyone, and it does feel a bit like a mini slog if you're not into those incredibly subtle storytelling tropes and the sort of world building that's going on there. But it does an amazing job of setting up the next book. The Dragon Reborn, then. Rand is the dragon. Everyone knows it, but we need to solidify that fact. Let's go on an Arthurian themed journey. Rand cannot control his powers. Rand feels really bad about this, especially when the camp he is in gets attacked, and he is useless and people die because of his inability to control magic. Now, one thing worth mentioning here, male and female halves work very, very differently. Whereas the female half is described as almost a blissful, serene moment, almost like immersing yourself in the moment and going with the flow and just gentle touches. The male half is described as wrestling with a torrent or you drown. Very, very different. And explains why, as well, there is a dichotomy between strengths within the various different elements of the power as well. But with this in mind, Rand pegs it. Eventually, it just disappears, just goes. But he knows that he's got to get the sword in the stone. Excalibur. No, sorry. It's not called Excalibur, is it? It is called Calendor. I had to check. I forgot. There's a lot of fantasy words in this series. Realizing he's gone, they need to find him, and they end up trying to track him, but he's always too far ahead. Perrin and Moraine are the main two, tracking him with their own group of people. You also have stuff going on at the White Tower as well. Once again, Egwene, Nynaeve, and Elaine have returned there. They've taken Matt there to be healed from the magical MacGuffin that he picked up in Book 1. He's really not in a good place, just to say as well. So you have this hunt. This is a Rand light book for big periods of it. The focus for this very much is on Moraine and Perrin, and then on the girls in the White Tower, and beyond the White Tower, as they then go off and do other stuff in secret, inverted commas. So we have a lot more of the Aes Sedai and the White Tower politics here. I really do like the White Tower politics. I think it's a lot of fun seeing this organization that's meant to be a beacon of consistency in the world, tearing itself apart in interesting and small ways. Fascinating to watch, especially as we begin to realize there's something else in the tower. The Sonshan, they're still around despite losing badly at the end of Book 2. They're still causing chaos. Don't see a huge amount of them in here, but it is worth mentioning. And we're beginning to expand on the world now. The world knows what's happened with Rand. They know about the Dragon Reborn, and this is a restructuring of the world. Is he a threat? And that's what's causing the split in the tower itself as well. This gives Perrin's character time to really bloom a little bit. I will say, on this read through, Perrin is my least favourite of the three. And this surprised me because I liked Perrin quite a lot before. I just find some of his chapters to be quite dull. He is very introverted as a character. He's very introspective. Now, on saying that, I do like the romance that he goes through towards the end of this book and into the next one as well. That's really interesting to read about. I do like the interactions that he has with people, and especially the interaction between him and Moraine. It's especially spiky. I love the fact there's a thing here, and we've seen it a couple of times, where he just literally picks her up and puts her to the side. No normal person would do that to the Aes Sedai. I can't remember if that's in this book or not. I know it is a thing, though, that Perrin has done on multiple occasions. You also have the very clear indication that people are out of their depths here. Especially, again, with Egwene, Elaine, and Nynaeve. They get themselves into some scrapes that they have no right to be in. Despite them trying to bluff their way through, they've been given serpent rings, so they're playing off as Aes Sedai, and they are not actually beholden to the Oath Rod. Important facts there. And they sometimes play this very well. There's far smarter people in opposition to them at this point. And I do like that as a storytelling thing, where even though our characters are clearly relatively competent, the people they're going after far, far, far more competent than our characters. And also what I really, really like is we're beginning to start seeing the Forsaken a lot more. We've had Whispers, we have had some appear already. My favourite Forsaken really comes in the next book more than this one, but we're beginning to see how wide and how long those dark ropes go. Pacing, again, this is faster paced than book 2, slower paced than book 1. Again, this does have the travelling across the world element that book 2 has in abundance. But this feels less one character centric than that one felt, at least while reading through it. Perrin and Moraine do have a fascinating relationship, which is very, very different to Moraine's relationship with anybody else. Worth mentioning there. We do get a little bit more Matt in here as well, which I do appreciate. Matt is my favourite character. I can't remember what he did. It has been a good few months since I've read this. I remember feeling like his character was a bit off in this one, and I know Matt is perhaps the most difficult character to kind of connect with, so I'm not sure what that is with this one. The next book fixes that by and large. We also start to truly see Matt's effect on the pattern with the Dark One's own look and stuff like that as well. And the voices in his head, his connection to the past as well. Really important. It's been touched on before. Definitely an important fact going forward. Of the 3 books so far, this is my favourite. Again, not without its flaws though. It is not a perfect book. The ending, again, feels slightly out of place versus the other books, but it does fulfill the prophecy. And this is very much the most Arthurian in terms of the tales, with the sword in the stone being a literal thing here, as well as it not really being a sword, and more of a symbol and more of a something else as well. And as we discover later on, not all things are as good as they seem to be. So, again, enjoyed that one. Special note, this I think is the best narrated of the books I've listened to by Pike. She does an amazing job in all of them, but this one, very, very, very good. Really did sell me the Pike becoming one of my favourite audiobook narrators as well. We reach The Shadow Rising. This is a lot of people's favourite book. It's not mine, but a lot of people's favourite book. Min, a character I've not really touched on previously, has images of the White Tower being broken. This is the book where we really hit that shattering point of the Aes Sedai politics, and it is done amazingly well here. And it makes Swan Sanche the Amyrlin seat. Wow. Actually a really, really interesting character in a way that I don't think the TV show managed to do, and they did change how that played out in the show as well. We also are aware that the Dark One is touching the world a lot more now. We have found more broken seals. Again, didn't touch on that earlier. Probably should have done. Never mind. This is me spitballing off the top of my head. But we have Rand now very much consecrated in a position of power within the Stone of Tyr. He is the dragon. He's accepted as the dragon. People don't necessarily like this, and people are trying to politically play him, but Rand has become so hardened to everybody around him and so prideful in many regards that doesn't really take counsel anymore. And also has his own stuff he needs to go and do. So you have the putting the sword back in the stone. You have him playing really well at politics in a way that's actually incredibly dangerous and incredibly smart. We have the true introduction of the sea folk as well, and the return of the Sonshan to the mainland in a lot of areas as well. But the driving force of this, really, for me, is the goings on in the tower and the continuing hunt for the Black Arja members that are established in earlier books, the secret sect of the Aes Sedai that serve the Dark One. And we have even more of Egwene, Elaine, and Nynaeve being out of their depth. But we also get the first true taste of Nynaeve's power. And I like that. And we actually have the true sort of first proper looks at one of my favourite rivalries in the entire series, which is Nynaeve and Megidion the Forsaken. That dynamic is so good. So good. We get a load of time up in the Aiel Waste. We finally start to learn more about the Aiel themselves. We had a bit about them in the previous two books, especially in book 3. Here they kind of take a little bit of centre stage, and we're getting to the final points of Rand proving himself to be the chosen one to the various different cultures, in this case to the Aiel. And you have a further deep dive into the lore of the world, into these great superstructures like Viridian, a former city at one point that is now almost like a hidden pilgrimage that is linked to the prophecy. Looked at the past, and you have their own version of the Fae with the Aelfin that appear, and I can't remember what the other half is called. There's the Aelfin and something else. They sound very similar. And the idea that there is something beyond the current world that everyone else is dealing with that's somehow more powerful, that's fascinating as well. And we're getting more of the Forsaken coming out of the woodwork. You also see the continuing fracturing of the friendship group, or at least that's what it appears to be, at least. Especially in this case, with Perrin and Rand, with Rand banishing Perrin from his court. And Perrin returns home to the Two Rivers to find things are not looking great. The White Cloaks, who we've met very early on, who are incredibly anti-Aes Sedai and are, in general speaking, horrific inquisitor-like people. Yeah, they've gone to the Two Rivers because they found out that's where Perrin's from, and Perrin has golden eyes because he's a wolf brother, and that makes him a darkspawn. And yeah. And this very much digs into Perrin's story and his wolf-like abilities and him leaning into it. And this is the story of acceptance, and the big sort of thing going through this: hammer or axe? Are you a hammer? Or are you an axe? Are you here to kill? Are you here to fix? And that is something that really does run through Perrin's entire story. Doesn't make any decisions here, but the decision of which direction he goes is a really, really important one. And we get more of Perrin's romance as well, which I really do like. Matt has a fair bit of stuff in here as well. One of the most important items in the book, especially for Matt, comes in this book, I think. The Foxhead Medallion, in particular. And yeah, that's important. And Matt's ability to get himself into and out of trouble continues to reinforce the Dark One's own look that he carries with him until it sort of gives him up. Bizarrely, I don't like this as much as book 3. Even though objectively this is probably a better book in terms of pacing, in terms of structure, and in terms of what it actually delivers for the world. But this is the book that is very much the tipping point of everything. This is where the new world, the order, I should say, is shattered beyond fixing back to how it was. So this is very much the shift of the status quo that the series has been building to at this point. And for that reason, on its own, this is perhaps, if you are going to read the series, and I've seen other people say this, but I kind of agree, if you don't know if you want to commit to it all, commit to reaching book 4, the end of book 4, which is still a hell of an undertaking, just to be clear. That's like 4,000 pages. But this is the tipping point of the world. This is where everything really, truly begins. And it's a good version of a book doing that. But that's my vague thoughts on all the books. What about the characters? My thoughts on the characters and the world building. And the world building is incredibly detailed, and I know that is not for everyone, but I personally love it. But I do like my world building in books. What I will say is there are a lot of really minute details in here that do play into making this world feel lived in. Even if it's just talking about fashions or materials or colours, they give you an insight into the various nations, cities, and the people that live there, which are very, very easy to overlook. Now, is there a bit too much detail? Probably for a lot of people. I know a lot of people do complain about how in detail it is. Do I really need to know how many buttons and what colour they are? No, you don't. But there's subtle showings here, rather than having to tell you, that works really well. And that's why certain things, for me anyway, hit so well later on. It does a great job of giving identity to each individual area of the world. And also, there's a lot of countries here. It's very easy to get things mixed up. I constantly get the names of places in here mixed up. but the aesthetics I do not, and that's because of the world building. And you get this idea of why certain countries and nationalities do not get along because of some of this, because of trade, just because of mentality as well, which is a fascinating little side sort of look, which you don't get that much in fantasy, although I will also say it is very rare to have such a hodgepodge of different sort of powers within a world beyond like 3 or 4 major ones. Here, there's a host of them. And later on in the series as well, I know other ones are introduced with literally no explanation whatsoever. We knew they were there, we just didn't think they were important. Well, that was a mistake, wasn't it? But in terms of the characters, there's a lot. There's a lot. I'm going to focus on our core cast, but I am going to touch on a couple very quickly here. Avienda is going through a really, really interesting start to their journey. Avienda is a member of the Aiel, and by the end of book 4, they are transitioning from being a sword maiden, so very much a fighter, an elite fighter, into becoming a wise one. And they're not liking that at all, because to them they were very much married to their shield, so to speak. Fascinating beginnings of their journey. Really enjoying that so far. Min doesn't get a huge amount of time. In fact, I will say that whilst I do like the way Min is portrayed, very much this tomboyish character who really doesn't like dresses, especially when they're forced to wear them as disguise, they do feel a bit superfluous at times to the story. They almost feel like they are a walking plot point. I like the character. Not sure the book's actually needed her, though, other than to just go, hey, foreshadowing, but that might just be me. I like the way Morghese is described to us, how she's initially shown. This is the Queen of Andor. But then when we revisit her later on, because we've met her before, there is something very, very off. And it's amazing how little time we've had with them previously, but how their reputation very much precedes them, that you can spot this straight away. The Children of Light as an organisation, quite interesting. Not going to touch on specific characters, but what I will say, this is very much a zealot-like army who, on the surface, wants to do good, but ends justify the means. Very much the opposite. Well, very much them and the Sunshine are very, very similar in that regard. They both want to fetch order to the world for different reasons. Methods, a bit questionable, and some of their characters have this fascinating approach to honor and morals, which is so fundamentally flawed that you look at it and kind of have to cock your head a little bit and go, how is that possible? Well, then you look at some of the nut jobs in the real world of religious fanatics and you go, oh, actually, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Also, Elaine, daughter of Andor, doesn't get as much time as Egwene and Nynaeve. They are the two Withers originals, but as a group with those two, a fascinating, soothing balm of a person. The education in being able to do conflict resolution but project power and authority as well is really well done here. And the fact that you see this shining through, but this is someone out of this group who is the leader, or should be the leader, just based on the way they approach situations. They realize their own flaws, they can spot the flaws in others, and they can spot common ground and try to build on that. And honestly, if they hadn't been around, I think Nynaeve would have killed Egwene. Something I can sympathise with. But on to the main cast of characters. I love the relationship between Lan and Nynaeve that develops, especially Nynaeve's, well, actually both of their struggles with that, because of their other perceived responsibilities and how they take precedence over their happiness. Fascinating mirroring there for both of those characters. I think this is the best relationship within the Wheel of Time series on a romantic level, at least. And it's hard to call this a romantic level because of the way they are together, but you get these little snippets of moments that's like, oh, that's so sweet, and you see the hardening of the softening of the hardened exteriors, I should say. And Lan's relationship with Moraine, and as that kind of degrades is the wrong word, but it becomes more and more strained as the story goes on, as Moraine ends up keeping more and more secrets to try and keep people safe. Moraine knows so much more than she lets on. So much more. And Moraine's frustration as well that she starts to feel, because she can feel everything slipping through her grasp, and she only had a tenuous grasp on it to begin with, is gold. And the fact that she's having to work quickly and sort of acquiesce a little bit, go, you know what? I can't control this anymore, but maybe I can do something to steer it away from the rocks. The relationship between Moraine and Rand is so important, especially by the end of book 4, the sort of acceptance that's there, that it really, really does highlight some issues that happen later on in the series with Rand and other members of the Aes Sedai in particular. On the boys' side, I think Rand is my favourite on this read-through, which is surprising to me. There's just so many little subtle nuances that I've missed in the past when I've read this. The slow slide into madness, the battle with the expectation on what is basically this farm boy now being expected to be the saviour of the world. That would drive anybody insane. The frustration at not being able to grasp certain different things or be able to do things despite being told how powerful they are. And that stubbornness that's established really early on of, don't tell me what to do. I don't like being forced to do things. Still maintains throughout. That sheep herder thing sticks throughout. There is a point in here where Rand doesn't like to hurt women and doesn't like to kill women, even though 9 times out of 10 the people trying to stab him in the neck are women. It takes him quite a while to get over that, and the amount of guilt he feels when he does that is, I've seen it be criticised a lot, and I can see why, but with his upbringing and the way he was brought up and the way he feels responsible, kind of makes a lot of sense to me personally. I think it's one of the primary driving forces for a lot of the stuff that he does, and it also builds that flaw into him of not willing to use all the resources he can to win. And that puts him in some major issues at times within the book so far, and will do in the future as well. Matt, we've not had as much time with. Matt, historically, is my favourite character. I don't know what it is. He's not resonating quite as well on this time. He has the best moments, and he has the most interesting arc for me of the 3. Don't really have much to say about him so far, though. I love how spiky he is with everybody, and how everyone just sees him as trouble. 100% accurate. Love that for him. But also how shocked everyone is, where he shows how hyper competent he is as well, often by accident, but still. Matt is the archetype of the roguish character with a heart of gold. I'm not being paid, I'm not doing stuff, but then he'll get paid and then give his money to charity. That's the sort of character that Matt is. Not enjoying him as much on this read-through, probably still my favourite character though. That brings me to Perrin. I used to really, really like Perrin. And I still do. I just don't find him very interesting. It feels like his personal arc is going to take a lot longer than it needs to. And I do know we do hit the slog, and there's quite a bit of Perrin in the slog and around the resolution of his arc. I like the sense of responsibility. I like the fact that he has no idea how to deal with any of this. Very similar to Rand in a way, but in a more controlled fashion. Whereas Rand is kind of all the time and doesn't know how to do things, and sort of not so much panics, but is far more impulsive. Perrin is the polar opposite and has the same sort of issues going on to a lesser extent, though, and is far more measured and controlled. And whereas Rand will do something decisive on impulse, Perrin is the opposite and ends up indecisive because of consideration. Interesting mirror to each other there, and it explains why they do have these moments of clashing as well. That fetches me to my favourite character and my least favourite character. Nynaeve and Egwene. I remember loving Nynaeve on my first read through, and I love her even more now. I love the fact you have this young person who ended up in a position of authority early on and was so questioned because of their age and because they were a woman in some cases, that they've learned such a level of self-reliance that they resent having to rely on other people, and that makes them spiky and defensive and stubborn and determined. All that works so well and plays into Nynaeve's difficulty in learning how to harness their own power. Absolutely love that. And I love you have these various almost humbling moments where you can tell Nynaeve is going to throttle someone and is barely holding back. That seething anger that drives underneath, the very opposite of what it is to be the calm, serene Aes Sedai. Fascinating. And it's really interesting to consider the idea that maybe the Aes Sedai aren't as strong as they used to be because they've let the passion fade. And Nynaeve is very powerful. And also the fact that they are, because of age, kind of the de facto leader of the three girls, but they have the least authority, strangely enough, despite being the most powerful. Especially when Elaine is in the group. Really interesting. Very much takes the lead, and you see the growth as you go through, beginning to acquiesce and make way. Love that. And I already mentioned I love the romance with Lan as well. Egwene I didn't like on my first read through, and I don't like her now. I think she's conceited. I think she has the morals of a cat. She is not as bright as she thinks she is, which is a dangerous thing in someone who is as powerful. She does everything to rub me up the wrong way. She does have some great moments. I don't like the relationship she has with Rand. I don't like the relationship she has with the people around her. She very much has a superiority complex because she, out of the three girls, has the balance of control and power that Nynaeve and Elaine don't have. And it makes her cocky and it makes her arrogant. Now, I will say, book 2, amazing character development, and it makes sense for her after being leashed that she'd also become distrusting of people, but those character traits make her incredibly unpleasant to me as a reader. The exact character archetype of power gone to their head for the wrong reason, have learned the wrong lessons from their story. I don't like her. I know where the story ends with her, and I'm okay with that. But I think it's fair to say a lot of the issues that happen involving the girls, quite often it's because of either Nynaeve's stubbornness, which makes a lot more sense to me, or Egwene's stupidity because of arrogance. And that arrogance never really goes away, which is a thing. And I don't know how I don't know if I just don't like her as in general. I don't know if it's a fair critique, but easily my least favourite character. This was meant to be a quick video. It has not been a quick video. My plans for 2026 then, I do intend to continue my reread of Wheel of Time. I don't know if I'm going to do physical or audio, as mentioned previously. Book 4 marks the end of the Rosamund Pike audios, and I wasn't a massive fan of the original audio works, so I may switch back to physical reads. I probably am not going to get near Wheel of Time till March again, however. My current aim is to read at least 4 of the books again this year, so that would take me up to book 8. But you never know, maybe I'll be able to get a lot more done than that. We shall have to wait and see. In terms of how it's going as a buddy read, kind of not. Other people have gone on to other projects. I know Elaine has read books 1 and 2, but hasn't started book 3. I was only just started book 3 yet. At some point, we will do a chat, potentially a video or a live, talking about our thoughts so far, because we have very different takes on a number of the characters. Cough, cough, naive. But there we go. That's my thoughts on books 1 through 4 of Wheel of Time. Have you attempted this mammoth of a series, and how did you find it if you did? Who is your favourite character and why? Please let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I will see you all soon.